on the line with us is our old friend Jamal Abdi with the National Iranian American Council, NIAC, NIAC.org is the website. And Jamal, welcome back to the program.
Hey, how are you, Tom?
Great to have you with us. Big news, I think, tell me if it is or not, the European Union, this is from The Hill. The European Union, the EU, is warning businesses, European businesses specifically, that cut ties with Iran over new U.S. sanctions, that those firms could face EU sanctions. This is a quote from Nathalie Tosi, an aide to the EU's foreign policy head, that she told BBC Radio 4 yesterday. If EU companies abide by U.S. secondary sanctions, they will in turn be sanctioned by the EU. We're doing this in order to signal diplomatically to the Iranians that Europeans are serious about the Iran nuclear agreement. And the EU said on Monday that it would forbid European entities from complying with the sanctions. What's going on here?
The EU is fighting back. They announced that they would take this step, these blocking sanctions. They've done these in the past. It really, it's a question now of how strictly will the EU actually enforce this? Will they actually have some bite to their bark and seriously, go after their own companies who comply with the sanctions? Mm-hmm. I think that's up in the air, and there is more that the EU would need to do in order to not just have the costs for companies doing business with Iran, but also creating some, banking channels, exploring ways that, oil exports could continue through some sort of trading or bartering mechanism. So this is really, I think this is a symbolic step. I think the EU has showed that it is very serious about protecting this deal. But the actual practical implications that remain to be seen. We've already seen European companies leaving. Yeah,
Daimler left. If it's mostly big German companies that are leaving, and Germany basically has the muscle to change EU policy, is that the source of your skepticism? Or a source?
That is a source. I think that I think that large German companies probably will test this proposition. Now, I don't know that for sure, but it's a matter of, does the political will exist for the EU to actually carry out these measures?
So,
and really,
go ahead.
It's a game of chicken now between sort of Donald Trump and the EU.
So Standard Chartered Bank, which is a UK chartered bank, but they have U.S. branches and U.S. They do business in the United States. In fact, they're one of their biggest branches is at 1095 Avenue of the Americas in New York. They are licensed to operate in Iran. And among international banks, only about 25% of them are actually licensed to operate in Iran. So should Standard Chartered Bank in New York City be closed? I mean, is there any discussion of this? And then I want to get into where all this is going. I mean, if we're leading ourselves toward war with Iran.
Well, on your first question, that is what I would expect. I would actually, this is the Trump administration posing to the rest of the world and these banks and companies. You either do business with Iran or you can do business with us. You can't do both. And so all the indications are that this administration is going to go after everybody, as strictly as they can. So for now, I think they're following up on those threats. We've seen them back down a little bit on the oil sanctions, but we'll see how much of this is bluster and how willing they are to actually go after these companies. Yeah,
I just find it breathtaking that the Trump administration thinks that we can say to Britain or China or Chile or even Zambia, if you do business with Iran, you can't do business with us. It blows my mind. Is this a standard in past sanctions? I mean, is this the normal way that sanctions are done?
The sanctions on Iran are really some of the broadest sanctions ever created. So these sanctions, these are sanctions that came into force under the Obama administration, largely driven by Congress. But as far as the Obama administration was concerned, their role was to make sure that the rest of the world was actually bought into these sanctions. Right. And so they actually held off Congress for a long time. Well, not a long time, but they held Congress off so they could actually go to the UN, get approval for this, get the rest of the world to actually buy in. So it was much different. I don't think we've ever seen something quite like this where it's the United States versus the rest of the world in terms of enforcing its sanctions.
That's bizarre. So if we continue with this, and particularly in November, if we start blocking oil exports out of Iran, I understand already, and please fact check me on this, that the value of the Iranian currency has dropped by at least 70%, which means that everybody in Iran, at least on an international basis, is 2/3 less wealthy or 3/4 less wealthy than they used to be, than they were just a year ago, which is pretty shocking. I mean, that's got to have a huge impact on Iran. And I saw a thing in the Financial Times this morning that there were protests in the streets in Iran, in Tehran, yesterday. Could this, if the pressure is great enough on the Iranian government, might it provoke them to, rather than saying, oh yeah, we'll come on bended knee to you guys and do exactly what you want, to instead say, we're going to shut down the Straits of Hormuz, and through which a very large percentage of the internationally traded oil in the world passes, and not just to the United States, by the way. And if they do that, might that be the thing that would lead us to World War III?
It's hard to envision anything other than an escalatory cycle right now. Donald Trump's offers of he's willing to negotiate with Iran without preconditions, which were then walked back by Mike Pompeo, who offered a bunch of preconditions. I think that in Iran, they are looking at those things, and politically, it's a non-starter. But there are a lot of question marks about, who is running the policy in Washington. Is Trump serious? But this whole approach is it's something that the Iranian, government and in general, they're just allergic to. This idea that they're going to be sort of forced to the table at the barrel of a gun, and so. Yeah, this threat of closing the Strait of Hormuz, it's not even the action of doing it. Even the threat is a form of leverage that Iran has.
Has the Iranian government already issued that threat, or is that implicit?
They've suggested it. They maybe have not directly threatened that it's imminent, but. If Iranian oil is taken off the market, it's likely going to mean that Saudi Arabia and others have to fill that gap, and they go into their excess capacity. So if they are running, near their full capacity, and Iran actually takes some steps to, suggest that it's going to do some things in the Strait of Hormuz, that could really do some bad things in the oil market, cause some real jitters, really spike the prices, and this could all happen, ahead of the U.S. midterms. So I think Iran is looking at, what kind of leverage do they actually have, because Donald Trump is going full bore with every piece of leverage that he has.
So
it's a very dangerous process.
Yeah, putting this in a historical context, back in the late 60s, early 70s, when we had, as I recall, 2 Arab oil embargoes or boycott embargoes, it produced significant inflation and some serious problems in the United States, but it didn't lead to war. To what extent was Iran involved in any of that, or was that principally the Sunni countries?
Gosh, you're asking me historical questions.
I'm sorry. That, if you're not sure, that's fine. I'm just curious. So what can? Go ahead.
I'm pretty sure Iran actually was helpful to the U.S.
Yeah.
During the embargo.
Yeah, I think that was before the Shah fell, so that would make sense.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So, and thank you for remembering that. I should have remembered it before I asked the question. So what can we do, what can Americans do to encourage our government not to take steps that could lead directly to, well, I'm saying this, that could lead directly to nuclear war? The scenario that I envision is, the Iranians close the Straits of Hormuz, the Saudis, the Americans, the Israelis, somebody attacks Iran. Iran reaches out to Russia and says, help us out here. Russia attacks the countries that attacked Iran, and boom, we're in World War III, a thermonuclear, possibly World War III. A, do you think that scenario is realistic? We've discussed this in the past. I'm curious your current thinking on this. And B, what can we do to prevent that?
Yeah, there are so many tripwires for an escalation towards war. And towards, exactly what you laid out, a war that brings in all of the parties who so far have been fighting proxy wars in the region, but never actually fighting directly against one another. So it's extremely dangerous. I think with sanctions, these are sort of, these are the diplomatic version of a drone strike where they almost are viewed as cost-free, that they can happen behind the scenes and the American public is not really going to be aware of what we are doing. They inflict, damage on populations, but largely out of the public eye. Sanctions, we're going to see humanitarian consequences. We are going to see medicine being denied to Iranians. We're going to see the all kinds of aircraft that can't be repaired, and the cost of goods is going to go up. And so I think it's really important that we talk about these things, and that these are being done in our names as Americans. Yeah. These are collective punishment in our name.
It seems to me that if people are in the streets in Tehran or in Iran, that given the type of government Iran has right now, that's going to work to the detriment of reformers like Rouhani and to the benefit of hardline right-wingers who actually would not necessarily be all that worried about a war. They might see a war as a way of strengthening their power, and I'm concerned that Donald Trump might see the same thing.
Yeah, this is the comfort zone for the hardliners in Iran's government. They love being in this spot. I think that this may be the death knell of the experiment of engaging the United States, at least for now. And for Donald Trump, I don't think he knows what he's gotten into. I don't think he's actually wrapped his head around this. He thinks that this is North Korea Part 2, and he's going to get some summit out of this.
Right.
He is surrounded by some of the biggest warmongers, and so this is really dangerous.
Yeah, John Bolton in particular. Jamal Abdi, the Vice President for Policy of the National Iranian American Council, NIAC, NIAC.org is the website. You can tweet him at jabdi, A-B-D-I. Jamal, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Tom.
It's always great talking with you. I always learn something, and I'm very concerned about this. Thank you.